Welcome in, everyone, to the Talkin' Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News. I'm joined, as I am each week, by Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com. The Talkin' Tide podcast, available to you wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts. You can also catch us live on YouTube or Facebook. So check us out anywhere you want. The Twitter feed, of course, is Talkin_Tide. You can get quick links to all our podcast drops right away there. And Travis, we quickly want to thank our sponsors, North River Dental Associates, Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa, and DraftKings. I almost did a mishmash there and said Northbrook, but that quick self-correction there, quick 5-yard penalty.
Hey, it's Monday. It's
Pre-snap.
Monday. You get one of those,
Pre-snap 5-yarder, and off we go. Yes, Travis. Depth chart Monday happened today over at the Naylorstone Media Room on the campus of the University of Alabama. Nick Saban unveiling the depth chart, Travis, as he does each year, Monday of the week of Game 1. Of course, the Crimson Tide has taken on Utah State at Bryant-Denny Stadium, 6:30 p.m. in its opener. And this podcast, just as a quick programming note, is also going to serve as our Alabama USU preview. And then we will follow up, of course, with our usual twice weekly podcasts beginning Texas week. So with that formality out of the way, Travis, I'll ask you your thoughts on this depth chart, this unveiling from Nick Saban, and what jumped out to you, if anything, about this rendition.
Yeah, we've both been doing this for so long. There's some things that you'll immediately look to, but it depends on the year too. You got position battles that change seemingly on an annual basis. So wanted to make sure the offensive line, wanted to look at maybe weak side linebacker, those cornerback positions, wide receiver spots. True freshmen are always of particular interest. Where are the new guys going to impact things, perhaps? And then I also was a little bit surprised by the lack of slashes or oars or whatever it is.
All-time
it seems
low.
to change. Yeah,
I'm going to guess it's an all-time low.
What was there, 9? I think.
Well, if you count the backup slashes, absolutely. Yeah. But among the ones, you had a set, clear starter everywhere on offense. You had on defense, of course, you've got a split at nose guard. You've got a split at both cornerback positions and a split at kickoff returner, and that's it.
Yeah, I think last year there were 25, Chase.
Oof.
25. Now, that was between starters and depth, so that was all inclusive. But I would have figured 20-ish, low 20s again this year. So to see 9 for the entire depth chart, that was very interesting. I'm with you. I can't recall another year in the Nick Saban era where there's been as few of those type of situations.
I think it's something that maybe we should have seen it coming based on Saban's comments over the last 10 days or so. More than once he said, look, I don't see a lot of depth. We got a lot of separation between ones and twos. He said that coming out of the second scrimmage. So at least among the ones, maybe it should not have been a surprise that there weren't a whole lot of co-starter situations at various positions. A harbinger of things to come, I guess, Nick Saban offered up after that second scrimmage with regards to that. But as you noted, even among the 2s and 3s, not a lot of that. I mean, look, if you look at the offensive line, there's not a slash anywhere. It's
even 10 guys.
Yeah.
1s and 2s. And that's where I was thinking, because of what he said about depth and not having enough of it, that we might see a lot of guys on the depth chart with a lot of slashes or a lot of oars because they're still trying to figure all that out. So that's where that was a surprise to me with that, was that once you got into the 2s and 3s, I thought running back, maybe there would be a slash or an oar there between Roydell Williams and Trey Sanders. With the way we had heard things had gone at weak side linebacker, even with Jalen Moody and Deontay Lawson, you figured maybe that might be the case there. And certainly at wide receiver for a rotation that's, still trying to figure some things out throughout that rotation.
you certainly get the sense, or at least I certainly have the sense, Travis, too, that even with the splits at the cornerback position, it kind of feels like that's got more to do with the health situation at that spot over the last couple of weeks than it necessarily does about the competition, right? Because they've had some guys in and out of the lineup, particularly Eli Ricks has been down injury wise, up and down. And of course, Kyrie Jackson's had a couple injury issues as well. So some co-starters sitting there at those cornerback spots. Maybe when guys get back healthy, you see that settle down too.
Yeah, I think Kool-Aid McKinstry, if I was going to pick one guy of those 4 or 5, he would be the guy I would feel most certain about as a starter on Saturday night against Utah State. But even with the inavailability of Ricks and Kyrie Jackson to an extent, they still, based on the depth chart anyway, based on paper, look like they're still in the mix for that. Now, I would think that Terrion Arnold, especially after we heard Nick Saban praise him for his consistency throughout the preseason, might be rewarded with a start against Utah State. But I'm with you. I think this thing through Texas, maybe even beyond, you're still working to sort out who your top 2 guys are, at least the starter perhaps opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry. And we think about Terrion Arnold, nothing in the way of game experience, but what do we really know? What have we really learned about that position in general, Chase, since the national championship game? We saw Kool-Aid and Kyrie both have their struggles at times in that game, including down the stretch. That competition went into the spring, continued over into fall camp. You've had a couple of those guys in and out, as you said, and I think they need more time probably to still sort through that.
Might need more time, and I was wondering if Brian Branch might even pop in there with the corners as a 2 or a 3 or something, because of course a couple of these guys can move around. There's some versatility back there. Brian Branch, a guy that they can move around. Malachi Moore, a guy that they can move around as well. He's listed as a co-backup at the strong safety position, also a backup at the star spot. They don't have the dime listed here, Travis. I imagine he's a serious player for that role as well.
Yeah, I would think Malachi Moore is in that dime package. We've seen Brian Branch play the money. We've seen DeMarco Helms play the money, but one way or the other, between safety, star, and money in the 6 defensive backs, I'd be shocked if Malachi Moore wasn't on the field in that look.
Tight end position of note as well, Cameron Latou, not listed at all. Of course, he's been out throughout the preseason with a knee injury, Travis. Nick Saban mentioned today that he's just now getting back to practice. He was on the treadmill last week. I believe today was his first practice back. But he had some positive and encouraging things to say about the young tight ends, Utz Kitzelman, Danny Lewis Jr., Amari Niblack. He said those guys are going to play. They took advantage of those preseason reps, acquitted themselves well enough that it sounds like they're going to have some kind of role. It doesn't mean they're all going to be catching balls, of course, but you see one in a 2 or 3 tight end look down on the goal line where Nick Saban likes to add an extra tight end or 2 here and there. And that position moves around, right? So they get H-backs, et cetera. So who knows how it'll play out, but it sounds like a number of young tight ends, and maybe it's on special teams, but they hit the field one way or another.
Yeah, I'm guessing Latou would be doubtful for Saturday at this point if he's just getting back on the practice field, and that's understanding. I'm sure they've been excessively cautious with him because they don't need him to rush back during preseason practices. Maybe he's at a point where he jumps right in here. But also with Kendall Randolph as your starter at left guard. These guys are going to have to play. As you said, it's not just from a positional perspective between the 2 tight end sets and the different things that you outlined that they like to do with those guys. It is very much a feeder position into special teams. So punt team, kickoff return, it's typically where you see tight end types on specials. And so you can include Elijah Brown in that mix too, as another one of those young tight ends. Wouldn't surprise me if we see them all against Utah State.
Tim Smith with the ones at defensive end beats out Jamil Burroughs. That was a bit of a surprise to me. I thought Burroughs had an excellent spring, really showed out on A-Day. Smith's a guy who I was high on as a freshman. I thought he kind of flashed early that year and looked like a lot of good things to come. Didn't play a whole lot last season, but for what it's worth, it looks like he's made a move.
It does. And we got to remember, right? This is a depth chart. It doesn't really lay out the situational packages and the ways that they like to use guys. Now, just from a base perspective, if you're going to tell me Tim Smith at one end, Byron Young at another end, and DJ Dale in the base as your three-man front, I could definitely see that. Once they start getting into nickel and maybe some dime, I think Tim Smith can still transition into those packages as a pass rushing type. But I would think Jamil Burrows, that's when he starts to come into play when they need some pass rush. Now, what you don't know is how much is Jaheim Otis eaten perhaps into, no pun intended, all of these guys reps potentially, because again, what we heard from Nick Saban on Monday is this guy isn't just a block occupier. He's not a double team occupier. He's a block beater and a double team beater. So if that's truly the case, I got to think big number 91 is going to be out there pretty early on Saturday night. And, we've talked about this before. Reps are already going to be precious, it looks like, in this defensive front because the outside linebackers are going to be so heavily involved.
Be very heavily involved, especially on third down, third and long, when we're going to likely see Chris Braswell on the field with Turner and Anderson. And yeah, Otis obviously had a phenomenal preseason. His weight loss in the offseason was well documented. The guy's a pretty phenomenal athlete. Nick Saban told a couple of red elephants he can flip, backflip, as a matter of fact. So hey, that's going to be fun to watch.
Did it off Saban's boat. Did it off the Saban boat on Lake Tuscaloosa, I think.
There you go. So and look, if you look up and down this depth chart, I'm not going to count the freshmen at the moment, but I can scan it from top to bottom. Not a lot of freshmen on here, Travis. Otis is one of them.
Yeah, it's not a side of the football where you would think they would need a lot of freshman impact. So for a guy, especially in an area where they returned a lot of game experience, now they didn't return much in the way of negative play production. So that's where there was an opening, and it sounds like Jaheim Otis has taken advantage of that. What I liked hearing about him from Saban, though, maybe as much as anything, Monday, was that he can be counted on to take care of responsibilities that don't involve beating a block. In other words, he doesn't sound like a guy. He sounds mature enough, even at this early stage in his development, that if the scheme calls for him to take on a double team so an inside linebacker can make a tackle, he'll do that. We see with so many of these young defensive linemen, it's one or the other. They're either playmaker types immediately, but as a result of that, they take some chances, maybe don't always play their gap, get out of their gap, and they expose the rest of the defense to a big play. And I liked hearing that from Nick Saban about Jaheim Otis as much as anything else on Monday.
All those guys need a little Josh Chapman in them. All right. And no one was less selfish. No one was more unselfish, I thought, than Josh Chapman.
Yeah.
He would bear hug that center and guard and knock their helmets together like coconuts. Yeah. That was his whole job.
Yeah, Chap's problem, the conundrum Chap was in was that he had better play good on first down in the base because that was his job. Right. But if he did play good on first down, he was immediately coming off the field in 2nd and 8, or 3rd and 8. He wasn't going to be out there when it came time to get the offense off the field.
Yeah, 2nd to 3rd down. That's where he got in shape with that jogging.
Yeah, he didn't like seeing those tempo offenses, Big Chap. That hurry up.
Not at all. The Talkin' Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. Glad to have you with us here on the Sunday Nighter. We're going to preview the Alabama-Utah State game here in a couple minutes. First, though, going to tell you about our sponsors. First, going to tell you about North River Dental Associates and that great service you get over at North River with Dr. Jack Smalley and his great staff of dental hygienists. They do it all, the porcelain veneers, the pediatric dentistry for the kids, teeth whitening services, extremely popular over at North River Dental. They also are doing Botox and Juvederm treatments, tighten up those facial features for those big fall events you want to go to. A routine teeth cleaning over at Dr. Jack's is going to get you in and out, door to door, in less than an hour typically. And of course, they do a super high quality job. They've been taking care of my teeth and my family's teeth for an awful long time, about 15 years, as a matter of fact. So give them a call. The phone number is 752-3506. You can also make an appointment online at northriverdentist.com. It's North River Dental Associates.
I'm going to tell you about Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. Coming up on Thursday, 15 years in business there in Greater Tuscaloosa for Peterbrook Chocolatier. I know Heather, Paula, the rest of the outstanding staff at Peterbrook. So thankful for Tuscaloosa folks and the surrounding area for making the last decade and a half very sweet. Good bread. You see what I did there?
Yes.
So Peterbrook Chocolatier, I've got to check with the chocolate lady. I don't know exactly if she has a big celebration or something set up for this week, but 15 years in business. And if you haven't already, by the way, you want to keep up with all things Peterbrook Chocolatier, follow Peterbrook Chocolatier Tuscaloosa on Facebook. They update constantly. So if there's a special, if there's something going on that you need to know about with Peterbrook, you can find it right there on Facebook.
Finally, going to tell you about our corporate sponsor, and that, of course, would be DraftKings. The wait is almost over. A new football season is about to begin. Get ready for NFL Week 1 action with the DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. DraftKings now giving new customers a can't-miss offer. Bet just $5 on any football game. Get $200 in free bets instantly. You want more action for opening night? Everyone can experience the thrill of DraftKings early wins promotion as well. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN. That's the Pigskin Podcast Network acronym. That'll help us here at the Talkin' Tide Podcast. Get those $200 in free bets instantly when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's promo code TPPN only at the DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the National Football League. Travis, Alabama, Utah State, of course, getting underway at BDS on Saturday. Be the debut of alcohol sales at Bryant-Denny Stadium, Travis. What's the over-under? I'm going to pin you down here. We don't do production meetings here on Talking Tide, so when I come at Travis with this stuff, it's live. It's no rehearsals
Mass
here.
Communicate.
What is the over-under on the price for, let's call it, a 20-ounce cup of suds at Bryant-Denny Stadium?
I was at an NFL preseason game about a week and a half ago, and just your typical, well, it may have been a 20-ounce can beer.
Right.
$13.50 for that baby.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oof.
And they couldn't sell them fast enough. I mean, they were just going straight out of the bucket. And even with, now you got to factor in the conditions, but I think the boys are still going to be plenty thirsty at about sundown Saturday night. So if this were an 11 a.m. or maybe a 3 p.m., maybe even more beer sales. But as far as a price, I'm going to go $12 for like a 20 ounce. What about you?
I think movie concession prices, right?
Yeah.
So that's what it's gonna look like. 12 might be on the low. 12 might be right. If it's not right, it's
more
low.
Than 10. It's gonna be more than $10. Easy.
Absolutely. I think 12 on the low end, maybe 15 on the high end. Here, and I'm thrifty with my nickels.
Oh,
Travis.
no, not you.
You pick on me about that sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not the first one where anybody's going to start counting what it costs. It's the second one, the third one.
Well, they're hoping you keep drinking them, you forget about it. That's what the boys. That's what they're hoping you do.
Well, that's why they on cashless. They on cashless at Bryant-Denny Stadium now too. Those two, they go hand in hand.
The thing is, if they have them cold enough, people forget about those prices. If they're cold enough. If that first one isn't ice cold, then it could be a problem. But if that first one's ice cold, there's going to probably be another one.
I got a Tuscaloosa News mailbag coming at you a little bit later this week. This is what they call a tease. on fan thoughts on the debut of alcohol at Bryant-Denny Stadium.
Yeah.
So some interesting
inevitability.
A wide array of opinions, Travis.
People in the zone been getting hammered for a decade now or more,
Yep. This is the great
Why can't the huddled masses enjoy if they would like? Imbibe.
All right. On to the Aggies of Utah State, Travis. They knocked off UConn in week 0. The final score there, 31-20. USU fell behind early and then just stormed back in the second quarter. I believe they were up 10 at the half after falling down by 14 early. They end up winning this one by double digits. Logan Bonner, the quarterback, 3 touchdown passes. A balanced offense, 542 yards of total offense, fairly even split between run and pass for Utah State. Travis, your thoughts on what you saw of that game, if at all?
Yeah, some surprise early. I did actually watch some of it and recorded it for preview purposes coming up this week. But UConn with Jim Moore Jr., good bread, getting off to that 14-0 start, and really did it by just gashing Utah State on the ground. And so I think there were some things that Bill O'Brien and that offensive staff can take away from that. I think if Alabama wanted to just go with heavier sets and run the football predominantly, Utah State defensively cleaned some things up, but UConn ran for 150 yards in the first quarter, 150 in the first quarter. And so, that's problematic. Utah State, not especially heavy in its defensive front. So Alabama, as you would expect, going to have a size advantage. And then, offensively, I thought Utah State was about what you expect. I was interested to see how Logan Bonner would look coming off the knee injury from the bowl game last December. He was still very efficient, very accurate. UConn really couldn't pressure him like Alabama is going to be able to pressure him, but it is a Utah State offensive line chase. Brings back 4 starters up front, including both of its tackles.
Things to watch for the Crimson Tide, Travis, as we close out this edition of Talkin' Tide. Sometimes, obviously, in a game like this, and look, we're talking about the defending Mountain West champs. It's not a USU in a total pushover. They got some athletes. They could score some points. I expect Alabama to win this game handily. Nevertheless, sometimes against a Utah State or a lesser non-conference opponent, it can be difficult to identify areas and positions that are exploitable, right, for the heavy favorite for Alabama. What are you going to be looking for on the Alabama side in this game that might be able to feed you a little intel on what's to come down the road this season?
Yeah, I think you start with the offensive line for Alabama. Kendall Randolph at left guard, Tyler Steen at left tackle, J.C. Latham at right tackle. I want to see those guys. And understanding, I don't think this is a Utah State pass rush. At least it shouldn't be able to really control things up front. If Utah State is able to constantly harass Bryce Young on Saturday night, it's a problem. And so Utah State didn't have a sack against UConn. Now, their defensive ends had 3 quarterback hurries apiece, so they were getting close. So I want to see those guys up front. I think Alabama, again, should be able to run the football effectively. We've heard from Nick Saban that he feels like that's going to be an improved aspect of this offense. Does Jahmyr Gibbs, right from the outset, hit a home run in this game with that speed? And I just don't think Bill O'Brien's going to put it all out there either in game 1. So from that perspective, not expecting a ton. And then defensively, man, with Logan Bonner at quarterback and even with Utah State having to replace a lot of its production at the wide receiver positions, I think from the giddy up, those corners are going to get targeted from the get-go, and they can do it in the quick game. You think so much about deep balls and things like that. I think Utah State's going to check under the hood of them corners from the outset. What about you?
Better get the ball out quick, but yeah.
And I think they will. I think Bonner knows that because with his knee coming off the knee injury, that's the problem. He's not going to be a threat with his legs in the game.
Right.
That's not a good place to be.
That is going to do it for this edition of the Talking Tide podcast. I want to thank our listeners and viewers for checking in once again. Travis and I will be back next Sunday night to recap the Alabama USU game and begin things in earnest on Talking Tide for the 2022 season. So for Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread of the Tuscaloosa News and Crimson Cover Television, and we'll talk to you next Sunday night on Talking Tide.